Today we will be using some watercolors and exploring different techniques for painting with them. The objectives for this lesson is for you to be able to say, I can experiment with new materials, methods, and approaches, and I can use various techniques when painting with watercolors. The essential question is, how many different ways can we use a set of watercolor paints? Take a look at the standards listed as well. So watercolor paint comes in a little container like this. They are sold as cakes of dry paint or as liquid in tubes to which water is added. The paint can be applied in various techniques. It is usually used on paper as watercolor is semi-transparent. The white of the paper gives a natural brightness to the washes of color. White areas of the image are left unpainted to expose the paper. Let's take a look at a few famous watercolor paintings by British artist J.M.W. Turner. Turner was born in 1775, the son of a poor barber. He did not have a privileged upbringing, yet he would become one of the wealthiest and most respected artists in England. His secret? Hard work. Painting procedures. We will go over the general rules for when we paint in class. Please note, not all the procedures will apply for watercolor paint. Cover your workspace completely with newspaper. Write your name and class on the back of your project before you begin painting. Roll up your sleeves and take an apron if you desire. Only take a small amount of paint. Use a magazine as your paint palette. When cleaning up, tear paint-filled pages out and return the magazine to the stack. Place finished painting on the drying rack with the rest of your class's paintings. Only one person at the sink at a time. Clean your water cup and brush thoroughly. Wash bristles with art soap. Leave the cup and brush to dry in the dish drying rack. Bristles up. If your apron is good, save it. If it got lots of paint on it, throw it away. Throw away newspaper and wipe up any spilled paint on the table or the floor. So after we've covered our workspace in newspaper, I will hand out pieces of paper. These are 6 by 9 inches, and the first thing you're going to do with the paper is write your name and class on the back. So for instance, if I was in 7th grade, Monday class, I would write M7. If you are in a different class, you will write a different thing. All right, now this is going to be the back, so let's flip our paper over. I will give everybody one piece of the more waxy kind of newspaper, and we're going to tape our paper down. So with masking tape, the first thing we want to do is tape all 4 sides down. And I'm going to try to make it even, but if it's not perfect, I'm not going to stress. The next thing I want to do is create 6 areas to paint in. So I'm going to take my tape again. I'm going to put a nice big piece right down the middle. And then I need to put 2 more pieces to divide this up. And once again, if it's not in the perfect spot, if it's a little crooked, that's okay. You don't need to stress about it. There we go. And one more piece. Right here. All right, perfect. So now I have 6 areas. And I have my paper taped down. All right, let's start to paint. To set up my painting area, I have my newspaper down, I have my paper ready to go. I want to get my paint, some paper towels, a cup of water, and my paintbrush. But I don't want to just place it wherever. It's going to depend on if I'm right-handed or left-handed. So if you are right-handed, all your stuff will be on the right of your paper. If you're left-handed, all your stuff will be on the left. So depending on if you are left or right-handed, go ahead and get your water cup, your paint, your paper towel, and your brush, and put it on the side that is your dominant hand. When we begin painting, if your paint palette looks like this, the first thing you should do is open it up, take one of your paper towels, get a little bit of water on your paper towel, and we're just gonna wipe the lid here. All right, nice and clean. So the first technique we're gonna start with is called dry brush. This is the easiest one to start with because our palette is dry and our brush is dry. Now, dry brush, dry palette, I don't have any paint at all, nothing's coming off. So I do need a little bit of water. So let's take just a little bit of water. We're gonna dunk our brush into the water and we're gonna pat it on our napkin, and then let's pick a color to go into. Dry brush is gonna work better with a darker color. So I'm gonna go down here and I'm just barely getting it wet. But we don't want it to be too wet. So if it gets too wet, we're gonna dab it on our paper towel. So there is my dry brush. Right, that was easy enough. Let's move on to flat wash. So when we wash our brush, we gently kind of just pull it up on the side here to get a little bit of water off. Here, what I don't want to do is so I'm going to put a little bit of water in here on my brush. You want to stir it around a little bit. A flat wash is simply one color. We're going to cover the whole area. And we want it to look the same. We want consistency. All right, there's my flat wash. Let's go ahead and wash our brush again. This time I'm going to pat it on the napkin, and I want to make sure I got all the color off. The next thing we're going to do is a gradient with one color. I want to pick a dark color again. I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to dunk it in, get a little bit of drop of water on it, come over here to blue, and I want to bring that blue paint back to life by stirring it around. Maybe take another drop of water. All right, so as I'm stirring it around, I'm keeping it pretty thick, and I want to start on one side with a really, really dark version of this blue paint. So let's start on the side here. So the way I'm going to make it lighter is by taking some of the paint. I'm going to swirl around the well here, and I'm going to put it now in the lid. But now this paint is the same as the paint I was using here. So in order to start to lighten it, I'm going to go back into my water cup. I'm going to take a drop of water and I'm going to mix that up. So now I've made a thinner blue paint. Now I'm going to continue. And as I paint with the thinner paint, it's not that noticeable of a difference yet. So let's go ahead, let's add more water into our blue paint. each time I add more water, I'm thinning the paint out. And with watercolor, if I'm painting on a white paper, the thinner the paint is, the more the white background is going to show through. All right, let's make it even lighter here. I'm going to use 2 drops of water this time because I'm getting close to the end and I really want to lighten it up before we get to the end. And for that last bit, I'm going to go in with a whole bunch of water. I want to make this a very thin paint. And let's do that last little bit here. The next thing we're going to do is a gradient with 2 colors. You've got to pick 2 colors that are going to blend together nicely. So I would recommend sticking with 2 colors that are next to each other on our palette. So I'm going to wash my brush again real good. I want to dab it on the paper towel and make sure all of the color has been removed. And let's go in for our first color. I'm going to do red and orange. So I'm going to go in here for red, and I want to wake that red paint up. I want to put a couple drops of water. I'm going to go ahead and start on one side. Since I'm doing 2 colors, I don't want to wait too long until I start to lighten it up. So let's go ahead, let's take some of our red paint. We're going to put it in the lid here, and we're going to thin it out with a little bit of water. So I have my thinner red paint, and I'm going to go ahead and start the next part here. And let's add even more water. We're going to thin it out even more when we get towards the middle. I'm going to stop just a little bit past the middle. All right, now I'm going to wash my brush. I want to make sure all of the paint, all of that color is off of my brush. And then let's go into our second color. So I'll be using orange for my second color. So we want to go in, we want to wake that paint up. Let's start on the opposite side. And when you start your gradient, it seems like you're starting a flat wash. But as the paint goes on, you will start to thin it out. So let's put some of this paint in the lid of our palette here. Let's take a drop of water, maybe 2 drops of water, and start to thin it out. All right, how about another drop of water? We'll thin it out even more. We're gonna go here, and now we're gonna paint on top of where the red is. Now I can wash my brush, dry it off a little bit, and then go back into my red and start to take it over to overlap where the orange is. There is my gradient with 2 colors. And the next one we're going to do is going to be a pickup technique. I'm going to give everybody a white paper towel for this. Do not use your white paper towel to blot your paintbrush. We can use our brown paper towels for that since we have a whole bunch of these. So I'm going to wash my brush nice and well. Make sure all of the color is off of it. And for my pickup technique, I want to pick a darker color as well. And it oftentimes can make what looks like clouds. So I'm going to start with blue. I think I'm going to use blue for my pickup. This way it kind of looks like a blue sky with clouds. So we want to do a nice flat wash of blue. You do want to do this technique while the paint is still wet. So I'm putting the paint on kind of heavy. I want to make sure it's still wet. I also want to make sure it's nice and dark. So it looks like a flat wash. But what I'm going to do now is take my napkin, my paper towel, and I want to ball it up. And I don't want it to be a folded perfect. I want it to be a sort of random shape. And I'm just going to blot it. And when I blot it, it'll pick up a little bit of the paint and it'll leave a lighter area. So let's see. Push down kind of firm. Ball it up. Let's get a clean part of our paper towel here. All right, so you can see the darker areas, and where I picked it up, it's a little bit lighter. All right, so I've got my oil pastel. and I want to draw something really simple with lines that I'm going to paint over. I want to be mindful that the colors that I choose, I don't want it to be similar. So if I pick a green oil pastel, I don't want to use green paint. In fact, I'll get the most impact if I use the complementary color to green. Do you remember what the complementary color to green is? That's right, it's red. So I could use red or maybe a blue or a purple with my green, and that'll have the greatest impact. Do a nice heart. And remember, this is just the line. I'm not going to color the heart in. I want to leave a lot of the paper empty so that when I paint, I still have paper. The oil pastel has a waxy consistency, and wax and water don't mix. So when I go to paint it with my watercolor, the paint will not stick where the oil pastel is. So I want to leave paper white so that the paint absorbs in the paper, but not where the oil pastel is. So I think I'm going to go in with purple. And now we're just going to do a flat wash right on top of our oil pastel. So I can take my paper towel, just give it a little blot. And there you see how the paint does not stick where the oil pastel was. When you're all finished with your painting, we're going to start to clean up. So one thing I'm going to do first is put a little bit of water on my paper towel, and yep, you guessed it, I'm going to clean the lid of my watercolor palette. This way, when the next student goes to use it, it's not covered in old dried paint. So that's nice and clean. Then I'll close the lid and I can put this away now. I'm also going to rinse my brush out well, and I will take it over to the sink. I will rinse the water cup, rinse the brush, and I will leave them in the drying rack by the sink to dry. My paintbrush will be bristles up. I want to peel my painting off of the paper. So I'm just going to very carefully do it because the paper can rip, so we do want to be careful. I want to label them before I turn it in on Google Classroom. All right, so when you have your painting finished, everything's labeled and the tape is taken off, you're going to take a photograph and send it in to Google Classroom. If your painting's still a little wet, you can put it on the drying rack with paintings from the rest of this class. However, if it's dry enough to take home, you may take it home with you. If you would like to put it into your sketchbook, take some of the masking tape and you may tape it into your sketchbook. When we're all done and we've turned everything in, the last thing we need to make sure is we finish cleaning up.